Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philip J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. A day late, but we had some good reasons for it, Philip, because
right.
yesterday was a little bit dramatic.
I mean, it was budget day, but I feel like, I know it sounds wrong, but the budget was not the biggest news, was it? I mean, it was probably the biggest
Not for
news.
people like us.
Yeah, for people like us, it was like, okay, there's budget day, so I usually let real journalists who know about this do their thing, and so I published a poll on belief in ghosts and angels yesterday, because it's like the budget is not my beat, but plenty of stuff that is our beat happened. And so, Eric, how should we approach this? What's the angle first? Where do you want to go here?
Well, I do think we start with the news. We did have some polls coming up, and now they're all pre-budget polls, so there's a limited amount of use to them, and also they didn't really show anything that was all that different. We go over them a little bit. We should probably start with the budget itself. As you said, we're not experts on economic or fiscal policy, and while it does deal with a lot of numbers, we tend not to like dealing with those kinds of numbers. The headlines are the big deficit, about $78 billion, not as high as some people said, not as low as some people would have liked. My general reading of the reaction was that people were kind of expecting a little bit more, in the sense that they're expecting that, it was being tagged as a generational transformative budget, kind of like the 1995 budget that Paul Martin brought in. Instead, people seem to be a little bit underwhelmed by it. So that tells me that it's not a budget that is likely to move the dial very much in one direction or another, which is probably fine for the Liberals, considering they're ahead in most dials. But the real question, I guess, unless you have some extra things to mention in terms of the budget itself, was, is this going to be an election budget or not an election budget?
Well, here's how I would preface my answer to you, Eric, and I think you would agree to this. You just referred to the 1995 budget, which was generational and has been looked as a break from the past. I just wonder, really, in 1995, were the immediate readings of that budget like this, or did it become this over time when we have the benefit of hindsight? So I wonder about that. Now, this budget, from what I've read, also from people who know more than me and us, big deficit, yes. Big spending on investments, as they said. I mean, there's a difference between spending and investments. We won't go over that. I know it's a big spin from the Liberals. But it seems like I look at the expected reactions and the unexpected reactions. Of course, Liberals love it. Of course, Conservatives hate it. Of course, NDPers will not be comfortable with it. It looks like the Bloc, the thing is, the Bloc really doesn't mind an election right now. They say they don't want to vote for a Harper budget, which is a fun line from Yves-François Blanchet to use that, a Harper budget, because Harper was not very popular in Quebec, obviously, but he was popular in many, many parts of Canada for a decade. If this looks like it won't be an election budget. And I think the Liberals were ready to not blink at all on this, judging by the reaction. And now we have, at least at the time being, one official floor crossing. And we have to talk about that, not only of who crossed the floor, but from which riding and from which province. It was 6 months late, Eric, but the Liberals completed the sweep of Nova Scotia yesterday, right?
Yeah, they definitely did. So yeah, that was Chris d'Entremont. He's the Conservative MP for Acadianapolis, that is in southwestern Nova Scotia on the Bay of Fundy, and he has decided to cross the floor, which is rumored to be only potentially the first of what could be a few. It's possible by the time that you're listening to this podcast, there has been some others that have crossed the floor, for all we know. The rumors did come out, 2 weeks ago, I think?
Yeah.
Turned out to be nothing at the time.
Yeah.
But now it is kind of a slow reaction, slow delay on this one. So maybe there'll be a couple more. So we'll see. It does raise the question of whether the Liberals will end up even needing the support of another party to get the budget passed. As you said, the Conservatives are a hard no. The Bloc is also a hard no, mostly because they made some very specific demands and none of them were given. One of them increases the old age security, and there's some other things in there. I was surprised at the NDP's response, which was, we'll take a look at it. And there are some things we like in the budget, some things we really don't like in the budget. But just the fact that they said there are some things that we like in the budget, to me, that is the path that they end up probably following. But again, maybe the Liberals won't even need those votes from the NDP to pass the budget, because they're only too short now, assuming that all the Liberal caucus votes for this budget, which I'd love to hear some of the, Stephen Guilbeault, Nate Erskine-Smith, whether they are on board with some of the less ambitious environmental stuff in the budget. Who knows? Probably all going to vote in favor. But what did you make of the fact that it is Chris d'Entremont who was the one who crossed the floor?
I mean, we did not do that publicly, but I think you and I, following the comments from our members, we made I remember I made a short list of potential floor crossers. It's just that when we hear rumors of floor crossings, they are far more frequent than actual floor crossing. I think you would agree, right? So when we hear, somebody might cross the floor, I usually roll my eyes and say, I'll believe it when I see it. And now we saw it. But thing is, the angle that I looked at it was not precisely with regards to the budget, but with regards to Pierre Poilievre's leadership. And so the question is, can he keep his caucus together? Now, losing one MP out of 144 and one who was admittedly a red Tory, so it's not that big of a surprise. Self-proclaimed, yeah, of course. You have to wonder, if let's say you're the Liberals and you want to do maximum damage to Pierre Poilievre on the road to his confidence vote, would it be better to have a floor crosser per week or per month until then, and not have like three people like crossing the floor on the same day? I'm not sure. Also, we have to remember, crossing the floor or just becoming independent and publicly say you disagree with the leadership of your party, the party you were under whose banner you were elected, it's not an easy decision for anybody.
No.
Like Monsieur d'Entremont, whatever you think of floor crossing in general, I mean, it's on a personal level, on a professional level, this is really hard stuff. And the reaction from all sides, I think, has been mostly expected. I mean, I think many articles and videos were unearthed of Andrew Scheer accepting Miss, what was her name? Leoneve?
Alice Love.
Alice Lev, I'm sorry.
Leona Alice Love. You're close.
That's right. And they were really like, well, we have a Big Ten party and everybody's welcome in our party. And suddenly like, yeah, you're a traitor. This stuff is expected. It's partisanship. But I really wonder what it does to Pierre Poilievre's leadership from this point on.
Well, it depends, I think, on how many there are, if there are more. The budget vote is not going to be for a little while. If I'm not mistaken, there are going to be some votes perhaps on some amendments that would come from the Conservatives and the Bloc. And that's the kind of thing that you could imagine the NDP not wanting to get on board with a Conservative amendment to the budget. And then there's a break week next week, if I believe, because of Remembrance Day. And then they're back on the 17th. That's a long time.
Yeah.
For a lot of people to, be really suspicious within the Conservative Party about who might be the next person to jump. Even if there isn't anybody else, you got to think that this is going to have a big impact on that caucus morale. If everybody's looking over their shoulder or looking at the person next to them, wondering if they are actually in secret talks with the Liberals, it is just hugely toxic within that party.
Yeah.
And if they do get a second and a third, which would give them the majority, then you do start to wonder, what impact does that have on Pierre Poilievre's leadership? Absolutely. One you can survive, I would say, especially when it's someone like d'Entremont, who is a little bit more, towards the center, is in a riding that the Conservatives almost lost in the last election.
That's right.
If it ends up being someone in a safer riding, someone who is not in the same kind of context as Nova Scotia, which has often had these kinds of folks, you can think of Scott Bryson, you can think of Bill Casey. Provincially, there have been a lot of floor crossers. It's not that unusual in a place like Nova Scotia. There's not usually that much difference between Liberals and Tories, whether they're PCs or Conservatives.
Yeah.
But if it ends up being someone from Ontario, someone from Alberta, someone from Quebec, it starts no longer to be about whether Poilievre has the skills to be the leader or whether the members like him. But it then starts to be sort of the same problem that you see with John Rustad over in British Columbia, is that eventually you get to the point where you're like,
yeah,
job number one has to be keeping the party together. And if you're not doing that, that's a bit of a problem.
Let me ask you this, Eric, because I'm not sure I know the answer, but I mean, you just said if somebody from maybe one of a safer riding, because Acadie Annapolis is a swing riding. It's a good one for the Conservatives, but it's not a safe one by any stretch. I think it hurts more of the swing riding going to the Liberals than a safer riding for the Conservative. The safer riding, you can say, well, that person's going to be defeated by whoever we choose next election as a Conservative nominee. If there was an election shortly, you would have to think, with the numbers we see in Atlantic Canada and the fact that M. D'Entremont, I mean, he would probably win his riding by being this blue Liberal, this red Tory, which is very close to, I think, what many people expect in this riding. So I understand, however, I mean, I know there's this speech every time there's a floor crossing. It's like, you should resign and you shouldn't run a by-election. The voters who voted for you did not vote for this. Well, I always have some reservations about this, because officially you don't vote for a party. You vote for a person. And that person can be independent, can cross the floor, can disagree with the party. You vote for a person in this country. I do understand, though, that, Conservative voters in Acadie Annapolis, they're probably not happy this morning. So,
well, the riding itself is interesting because so the Conservatives had 47.7% of the vote. The Liberals had 46.6%. Yeah. If the Liberals were looking for the three ridings they needed to win to form a majority, this would probably be one of them.
Yep.
What's interesting about it is that this is one of the few ridings in the country where the Conservative vote dropped. There was a drop of just under 4 points outside of Carleton, which had a little bit of a special case there. But outside of Carleton, this was the biggest drop outside of Quebec for the Conservatives, right? So there was something happening in the riding. You could even maybe argue that D'Entremont is not betraying the voters as much as would be if it's someone who'd won with 65% of the vote, because it does seem like there was a movement against the party in his riding. I don't know if he is enough of a name to keep it for the Liberals. I agree with you, though, that if there was a snap election right now, I mean, you can probably assume that the Liberals get their 47% plus a few extra points from D'Entremont, and then there you go. But if it's one of those other ridings where maybe there isn't the same tradition of PC liberal, very centrist kind of politicians, then it might not be as successful. So it will be interesting to see if there are any more, and especially where they're from. It would be nuts, though, if the Liberals end up getting their three, and it's the Conservatives and not, we were all saying, you could probably get a couple of the New Democrats, shake them loose. No, it could end up being the Conservatives that end up giving them a majority.
Yeah, a big tense party, they're not that big. They're not that wide. It would be, the 7 NDPs that are left are not going to the Liberals now. I think that's a pretty fair assumption.
Yes, I think so too.
What are you feeling about no election this before Christmas or just after Christmas? Are you really?
Well, I think now would be after. I was looking at the dates.
It would be after. It would be after.
Because if the vote is on the budget on the 17th, then the election would start after that, and then you would need to have the election either on December 29th, which would never happen, or if I'm not mistaken here, wait, let me just look at the calendar. If it's not December 29th, it could be January 5th.
No, it's not happening.
Because there are limits, right? You can't have super long elections like in the past.
It's 50 days, I think. It's 50 days, right? I think, so 7 weeks. Oh.
I feel a lot less likely there'll be a budget, there'll be an election now than I did a week ago. After last weekend, I was like,
it's possible.
These parties are starting to sound like they're ready for one. It's hard to see a way out. With the budget being not nearly as unacceptable.
Okay.
Yeah. Unacceptable. Like, it doesn't really have anything for any of the parties, but it also doesn't have a huge amount of red pills. For that reason, it doesn't also seem like a budget the Liberals would want to go into an election for. There's no fun thing in it that would help they could take to the campaign trail. And then when the NDP kind of waffled, that tells to me that they're probably going to end up supporting it in some way. And then now the floor crossing. So now if you asked me a week ago, I would have said 35% chance. Now I might be more like 5-10.
Yeah, me too. I agree. It's not happening. But the fact that we had election drama only 6 months after the general election, we'll talk about that later, but that tells me, Eric, that we may have an election in 2026. Like, it very well may happen. If this parliament doesn't work, again, if they get their majority by floor crossers, they get the majority by exactly the right number. That means nobody can have a cold. Nobody can defect. Like we just saw a floor crosser. You have some progressives in that Liberal Party, those who are on the left of the median Liberal that are still within the Liberal tent. They are getting tested right now, right? And so, as you said, you name Guilbeault and others. If, let's say, things go badly in the next year, they themselves could say, you know what, I'm an independent, and then boom, you don't have a majority anymore. So, I don't know, a 172 majority is not that safe for me. But,
Hey,
so
we're still waiting. Here. We're still waiting for the resignations of Bill Blair and Jonathan Wilkinson and Chrystia Freeland. Nate Erskine-Smith, if he decides to run for the Ontario Liberal leadership. Once those vacancies come up, the majority gets lost. You have to win those by-elections, and you'd have to call them fast enough. But unless they manage to get a dozen floor crossers, if it is ends up only even being 3, if they even manage it, it's still a razor's edge, and we can't take anything for granted. They also couldn't take for granted they'd win an election. The polls that we saw just before the last week, Nanos Research had a 2-point Liberal lead. Liaison had a 4-point Liberal lead. Abacus. Sorry, I'm all mixing up my words today. Abacus had a 2-point Conservative lead, and Liaison had Innovative had a 1-point Liberal lead. So, kind of toss up, kind of a tie, small Liberal advantage maybe if you averaged it out. So why would you want to go to an election right now?
Exactly. If the Liberals got cocky and says we're going to the election, we don't care. I know. I feel like it would have turned out badly for them. I'm looking at the numbers. My projection right now shows a status quo. And you have to think that all the Conservatives have to do is do maybe a little bit better, maybe a half a point better in Ontario, and suddenly we don't have a Liberal minority, we have a Conservative minority. Again, the Liberals are not doing better in Quebec. They won't win 44 seats in Quebec if had there been an election in a short term. And we talked about BC. 20 seats in BC was exceptional. They would have to replicate that. So, it would have been extremely risky. And I think the Conservatives we talked about this last week, would have been at the best position to make gains, even though Pierre Poilievre's numbers are not that great. And we'll get to that. So.
I want to talk a little bit about the NDP and their leadership race. So the polls had 13% for Nanos, 11% in Liaison, 9% in Innovative, 8% for Abacus.
Yeah.
If you're an NDP optimist, you can look at that 13. If you're an NDP pessimist, you can look at that 8. And there's not much there for anybody.
No.
But we did have our first real glimpse of the leadership race kind of standing. So with the quarterly fundraising numbers that came out, which overall showed that all the parties just had a huge drop in fundraising. Everybody closed up their wallets after the election.
Yeah.
We did get a glimpse of early fundraising in the NDP leadership. Heather McPherson, the Alberta MP, is leading the way. She has just under $100,000 raised. Avi Lewis is in second with $55,000. You got Rob Ashton, who is a bit of a later entrant, so his fundraising might be a little lower because of that at $25,000. And then that's pretty much it. Tennille Johnston and Tony McQuail are in too late to really have any real fundraising. But I looked at these numbers.
Yeah,
it's like 55% for McPherson, 30% for Lewis, and I think it was 15% or so for Ashton. If those were the final results on the first ballot, would you be all that surprised?
I would not. But, all right, fundraising numbers. You said many times in this podcast in recent months, follow the money, right? If you want to look at who's leading, really look at the money. It's just that it's so early. And McPherson being an MP has to have an advantage, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the grassroots are there. This tells me that if you had the needle, the New York Times needle, let's say, on which way it's going, I would give a slight advantage to McPherson at this point, but not an overwhelming advantage by any stretch. I'm surprised, Ashton. You said he's a late entrance. That's true. So this is quarterly, right?
Mm-hmm. It's up to September 30th.
Okay, that's right. Okay, that's why Ashton is only at 25. Well, that's still a pretty good number for Ashton's, considering how late he came in.
Well, the thing is that leadership candidates, even if they get in officially on a certain date, they're gathering donations before that, and then they put them all in on their day that they're officially recognized. So it's not like, if you got in on September 30th, your fundraising is going to be at zero. If you've been collecting money and just holding it in under your mattress for a few weeks, you'll get to put it forward, which is what happened here. But one of the things that's really interesting, I broke it down by province. McPherson, 80%, I think it was, came from Alberta. Right? Lewis was split between Ontario and BC. Ashton was almost entirely from BC. The thing is, it doesn't really matter in a race like this.
Nope, it doesn't. It doesn't.
You don't need to have a broad base.
Nope. It's one member, one vote, no regional breakdown, no points per riding, no... do they still have something with the unions, or it's just pure one member, one vote? That's done, right? Okay.
Yeah.
They removed that. So it doesn't matter. It's such a strange way to do things. And I know it's the purest way, right? One member, one vote. We're all equal. But there's a reason parties do regional breakdown. It's just the NDP has to look into that. But so they have, 5 months left? It's in late March.
Yeah.
So we're going to follow that closely, because that could be very interesting. And I'm eager to see, who among these candidates, Eric, would be willing to work with the government? I feel like the answer is none. Maybe a little bit McPherson, but if you have to squint a little bit, maybe McPherson. But the way they've been campaigning and speaking, and I've been reading and following their campaigns, Monsieur Lewis and Monsieur Ashton don't seem to be interested to cooperate with the current government. So that's why I said the odds of a 26 federal election. Is it 50%? Maybe.
Oh, I wouldn't go that high.
You wouldn't go that high?
45. 45.
The whole year, the whole 2026, you wouldn't say, 45. Oh, we're okay. We're arguing on semantics here.
To me, those are big. There's a big difference between 50-50 and 55-45. That's a huge difference.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Want to talk about some provincial polling that we got. What do you think? Should we take them all in one, or do you want to break it down province by province?
Okay, so it's basically we had the trio of provincial polls from Léger, British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, right? If we go by most boring first, no offense, we agree, I think it's Ontario, right? 44 PC, 32 Liberal, 13 NDP. Okay, we saw that. There's more than just voting intentions in there, but there was nothing surprising in there. The British Columbia poll was already kind of an old poll. It was fielded mid-October, so kind of late to the game. 48 NDP and 38 Conservatives. Now, Eric, if those numbers were to translate into a ballot box next year, let's say, that would be an easy majority for the NDP. Greens at 8%. And you wrote it on our outline here, what's going on in BC right now. We seem less interested in what's going on with the NDP, which is forming government, than what's going on with the opposition and Mr. Rostad. So half of Conservative voters want Rostad to go. And that blows my mind. Yeah. Not that the number exists, but that Monsieur Rostad would still stick around when we see those numbers. They have internal numbers. They would have to. They would have to know this. That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's not the first time. We saw that also in, I think it was the Angus Reid poll. It was. And 46% of Conservative voters think that Rostad should resign. 54% said he should stay.
Wow.
That's not the general population.
No.
This is the Conservative base. It really is remarkable that he... whether it doesn't seem like people necessarily dislike him within the party, but it's just that what's happening with the party is a party in dysfunction, in shambles. And even if you think the guy's okay, you probably don't think that it's okay the state that the party's in, right? So It's remarkable to me that you see these numbers within the voter base.
Yeah.
Even his membership review number wasn't great. 71% is not a great number.
No, it's not.
I just don't understand how he can believe that he's going to stay on that. In the face of all of this, at some point you need some self-reflection and be like, am I really the answer?
Well,
I think at some point Rustad's got to take his walk in the snow.
yeah.
If the Conservatives are going to have any hope, I mean, all of these polls suggest that they're in some trouble. So that, to me, he's going to be the number one pick, I think, on our resignation draft. Aside from maybe...
Well, yeah, we're going to do that in early December, the resignation draft. Always a fun one. But those are the two easiest pick. But at this point, if you're an NDP voter, you would want Rustad to stay. You just said that 46-54 figure is among Conservative voters. I wonder what it. I mean, was it indicated at the provincial level? I didn't note. I should put it in my notes. But at this point, Monsieur Rustad, all the turmoil we see around the BC Conservatives, who again 1 year ago came oh so close to win the election, this party has a strong base, could form government in the next election. But right now the crisis is really big, and Monsieur Rustad is not helping. So we'll see where it goes. But this is where, So that's the British Columbia.
It's also reflected in the fundraising numbers. Conservative parties, raise a lot of money federally. Alberta, lots of places, Ontario. In British Columbia, it's one of the places where the NDP is out fundraising the Conservatives. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was somewhere around 750,000 or so for the NDP and 500 something for the Conservatives in the last quarter. So you're seeing that it's not just polling numbers in terms of the party's ability to raise money. Huge compared to where they were 2 years ago, but still trailing behind the NDP.
I have the numbers here, so I should have put it in my notes. So, okay, should Rustad resign as Conservative leader or stay on as leader? Province-wide, it's 63-37 in favor of him to resign, which is not all that surprising, but it's not all that great either. A quarter of NDPers want him to stay, and a third of Green voters want him to stay. Those numbers are not good anywhere, and I don't see anything, men, women, young voters, old voters, the numbers are very similar. So we'll see how, but again, some politicians, and I guess it's part of what you need to become a successful politician. You need to think that you're invincible. Like a boxer goes in a ring not thinking, well, it's possible I could lose. No, you have to think, no, I'm invincible. I'm going there. I'm going to win. Nobody's going to take me down. It's just that at some point, when all the numbers are wrong, we saw Justin Trudeau hang on for way too long. We know that. Some liberals would disagree. They'd say, well, he stayed just long enough. We won the election. But that was
it all worked out according to plan.
Yeah, exactly right. That was a long year and a half of the end of Justin Trudeau. So anyway,
the other poll we got, so Alberta.
Yeah.
No, I'm not so much interested in the top lines for the top two parties. It's the bottom parties that are kind of interesting. So the top parties was 44% for the United Conservatives, 36% for the NDP. So an 8-point gap, kind of similar to other numbers we've seen, regardless of whether the parties are closer to 50 or closer to 40 or whatever. It's usually about this kind of gap. And then there's some of the other parties that I got some questions about. I noticed there seems to have been one note of frustration for you.
I'm annoyed. And I'm annoyed because, okay, dear people at the western offices of Léger, the Alberta Liberals in the last election had 0.2% of the vote and only had 13 candidates out of 87, and they were not seriously competitive anywhere, right? Why do you keep putting the Alberta Liberals, the provincial Liberals, in the poll is beyond me. This is clearly cross-pollination from federal confusion, which happens everywhere. But you don't need to have the Liberals in your poll, and they have 9% in this poll. And would you ready to bet that they're not getting 9% in the next election? They're not getting 5 or 4 or 3% in the next election. And so
I agree.
So I'm not frustrated. It's just that it makes the poll kind of useless. Because there is this confusion. Now, questions about issues and whatever, that's interesting, of course. But so the Alberta poll, okay, so 3% for the Greens, okay, they had 0.7%. 2% for the Alberta Party. Okay, same thing. They had just under 1%. The Republicans, the Alberta Republicans, which had a poll from Cardinal Research. You remember that, Eric? We talked about it.
I saw it in the news.
We frowned. Yeah, I saw it in the Toronto Star, right? 11%, I think it was the number. It was 18% in the regions. 1% according to Léger. So, yeah. But it's just that 1% of I cannot say, oh, Léger is clearly right. They have 9% for the Alberta Liberals. It skews everything from that poll. So I'm fighting to take any conclusions from this poll because of that number. I mean, am I exaggerating, Eric? I mean,
no.
Okay.
I do wish that, for me, if a party is at less than 1% in an election, and then I'm looking at you, PPC, as well. Yeah. You become in the other category.
Yeah.
And if people want to say you're voting for another party, that's fine. But yeah, there's no way that the Alberta Liberals would actually get 9% in an election held today. The fact that the Republicans were at 1% is also a little bit puzzling. Now, maybe those cardinal numbers were a bit too high for the Republican Party. But they did get 18% of the vote in a by-election not too long ago.
Yep.
The fundraising numbers in Alberta, though, kind of back up the fact that the Republican Party isn't in a good shape. They raised nearly no money in the last quarter, but so did the Liberals. The Liberals also raised almost no money. So the fact that they're polling this high is a bit frustrating. So I don't know what to make of these numbers exactly. I do think, though, that the broad stroke that the UCP has an advantage over the NDP probably holds. But again, we can't really know where those 9% would have gone if they weren't on the ballot. But yeah, it's a bit of a puzzle and a bit of a bit frustrating, I guess, when you see numbers like this that are just a little bit hard to understand.
Would the Alberta Liberals get 9% anywhere?
No.
Exactly.
Not even a single riding.
No, anywhere. So please, Western offices of Léger, stop doing this. It's not helping. So anyway.
We actually got some real results. That are incontrovertible. You cannot wonder about them. We got it in Yukon, had its territorial election, and then we also had the municipal elections throughout Quebec, including all of its major cities, Montreal, Quebec City. The Yukon results were, obviously, it's a small territory. You can't, as goes Yukon, so goes the nation. Not exactly.
Not exactly, no.
But the results were pretty stark. The Yukon Party, which used to be the PCs, they changed their name to the Yukon Party when the PCs were really unpopular in the early 1990s. They had 14 seats. They won a majority government. They had 52% of the vote. The first time this party has ever gotten over 50%.
Oh.
The NDP finished second with 6 seats. They had 38% of the vote. So they were up about 10 points. The Yukon Party was up about 13 points. And the Liberals, the incumbent government, lost 7 seats, won a single seat, and took only 10% of the vote in this election, down 24 points. That is just a remarkable slide for a party. But it's always hard to know what to make of results in very small jurisdictions, and just how personal some of them can be.
Oh, absolutely. So what's the population? Is it like 35,000, I believe, right? So
in terms
like
of voters,
that, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. I do not have much to say about this. I did look at the results. And interesting, it's just that I don't follow territorial politics. I don't have time. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, could this move federally? Like you just joke, as goes the nation. But the Liberals did win Yukon pretty handily in the last election.
Yeah, like 54, 55%.
Yeah, so that will be interesting to follow.
Yeah, well, it does show that people do make that differentiation. The Liberals had been in power in Yukon since 2016. They won a minority government last time, but they lost the popular vote by a big margin. So It's been building for a long time, and the party didn't even run a full slate of candidates. Only 21 people you had to find. They couldn't find 21. That shows the party was in good shape. Then there was the results in the rest of, not the rest, but in Quebec, the municipal results. I have one thought, but I'd like to hear yours since you're probably following it a bit more closely than I was.
Yes, I was. I did some media about those races, but Like, there were no big surprises. I mean, I think the Saguenay result is a bit of a surprise because it was the CAQ MNA that resigned from the CAQ to run in Saguenay, the city of Saguenay, and lost by a very close margin, but still lost. So her retirement is now very different. But aside from that,
very established.
Yeah, we had polls in Quebec City and in Sherbrooke and in Laval and in Longueuil and in Montreal. So all the bigger cities. I don't remember polls in Gatineau. I didn't follow the Gatineau.
Yeah, there was some actually too.
There was some, right? Okay. But the polls pretty much nailed it, and they were not close races. I mean, Martinez, she won by a smaller margins than the polls had measured, because Projet Montréal is this weird machine that it might be the only left of center party that beats his poll all the time. They always do. They have a really strong ground game. Laval went as expected, an easy re-election for M. Boyer. We had Longueuil, a nail-biter. Catherine Fournier was re-elected with, I think it was 88% of the vote, and her party won every district, every single one. So Frank McKenna of Longueuil. And also Sherbrooke, Madame Bibeau, former federal liberal, won the mayorship. So no big surprise there. It was interesting, but we'll see if it has long-term changes. Like the cities have to negotiate a lot with the provincial government, but we're kind of they have only 11 months to go that government. So I think it's next year after the provincial election that we'll have a better idea of those relations. So.
Yeah, there's not really much. I didn't see any broad sort of conclusions out of it. You know, you had someone like Martinez Ferrada, who was a bit more of a suburb kind of candidate, right? That's where a lot of her support came from.
Oh, yeah.
Versus the more like downtown transit focused kind of candidacy from Rabouin. But then in Quebec City, you had the opposite happen, where Marchand, who is more about the transit and all this downtown, he won there. Same thing kind of happened in Gatineau. So it wasn't like there was a rejection in Quebec of, you know, a more city center focus versus suburban. In some areas there was, in some areas there wasn't. I did note that a few familiar names did get elected. So you mentioned Martinez Ferrada, who was the Liberal MP for Hochelaga. We saw Marie-Claude Bibeau in Sherbrooke, was the Liberal MP. Stephen Blaney in Lévis, former Conservative MP. So there is sort of life after federal politics, if you want to run municipally.
Mayor of Rimouski, also former
Guy Caron, former MP. The biggest question mark, though, I have from these results, was Yves Lévesque in Shawinigan.
Yeah.
Now, if you follow federal politics, Yves Lévesque, you might have heard his name before. He's run for the Conservatives in the last 3 federal elections in Trois-Rivières. Came pretty close, in part because he's a well-known name, because he was the former mayor of Trois-Rivières.
That's right.
Now he's the mayor of Shawinigan.
That's right.
I don't understand. The Conservatives lose their candidate, I guess, in Trois-Rivières, but I don't understand how you can become the mayor of a different city than the one you were before.
Because you
I
move.
just think that is nuts. I guess so.
I mean, it would be nuts if it was like Alma and Longueuil or something, but Shawinigan is like really close to Trois-Rivières. It's 15 minutes drive on the 55
Yeah, but there's got to be like
highway,
a rivalry or something, right?
I would not know the rivalries of Mauricie, but it would be interesting. But he won, so, and it's not like the no offense to Monsieur Lévesque, but it's not like the Conservatives lost a big name here. He lost 3 times in a row. At some point, you have to give it up, right? So,
yeah, I suppose that's true.
It's just,
all right.
So.
Well, if at first you don't succeed, try again, and then
move cities.
Yeah.
It's funny. Sorry. Okay. Oof.
All right. Well, that'll be it for this portion. I guess we'll just move on to the number of the week.
No quiz today. I was too busy with the municipal elections,
fine.
but Eric, you will be tested once more in future
So
weeks.
I win gold for the quiz this week.
That's right.
Perfect result.
Yeah, no mistakes.
Infinity. My number of the week is going to be a very simple one because it's the one that we're focused on all week. It's 3.
Oh, it's not 72. Okay, yeah.
It's 3. The number of MPs, the number of votes that Liberals need to get to pass their budget. As of this recording, they are down to only 2 that they need. They got d'Entremont, Who knows where else they'll get them? Maybe they can get Elizabeth May on board. She seemed to be not all that keen, but maybe she said there's room for negotiation. There's always room for negotiation.
There's always room.
Maybe they get a few more floor crossers. Maybe they get some people to abstain. But 3 is the number of the week because that is the number of votes the Liberals need to get their budget passed.
My number of the week, I'm going to go a little darker if I may. It's also more personal. There was a poll from Research Co about medical assistance in dying, MAID. And the poll basically, and the question was long, but basically it was the current state of eligibility for MAID. Do you support it? And it was 85% support. And I see here 8% strongly oppose. So I say this because my mother is going through this and it's a tough time. And you really have to appreciate the fact that we now have this. It's not a perfect system, but Canada and the provinces, we kind of moved on to the what we said a long time ago, like life is sacred and under no circumstances. So I'm very glad to see that in Canada and all the provinces, both genders, all generations, majority support medical assistance in dying. So I wanted to point it out. So.
All right. Well, I'm sure all of our listeners and watchers share my sympathy for what's going on with your family. So, so thanks for that, and thanks for everybody watching and listening. And of course, you can support our work at thenumberspod.ca. We are not expecting to have a special episode this week because it's already Wednesday. People are going to get sick of us, I think, pretty fast. But you can go get access to the Discord, and of course, you get early and ad-free access to all episodes. So that'll be it for this episode. Philippe, have a good rest of the week, and we'll chat next week. We'll see if there are any more, if the Liberal number gets anywhere closer to 172 by then. But until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Have all a great week. Bye-bye.